Greetings, everyone. This is another interview by Joel and Michael. We are interviewing Craig Wright, the lead scientist of nChain, otherwise known as Satoshi Nakamoto, creator of Bitcoin, and all-round pretty bright genius, to be honest. But we're going to talk a bit more about things that Craig knows about, not solely on Bitcoin. We will be covering Bitcoin a bit, but we want to explore different areas and let people share in the conversation. Over to you, Michael.
Yeah. So, Craig, our first topic is chaos and order. And to start this off, you have written a dissertation back then, and it's called Gnarled Roots of a Creation Mythos. I repeat that, Gnarled Roots of a Creation Mythos. So what was that dissertation about?
So I was actually, it was a doctorate in theology, which is different to divinity. Most people don't understand actually what theology is. Theology is very close to philosophy in many ways, and there are a lot of overlaps. I mean, I did a lot of study in philosopher slash theological sort of writers of the past, such as Aquinas, and what I was looking at was the origin of the sort of shared mythological past between different religions, and in particular looking into the Greco-Roman conceptualization of Pandora. Pandora was the first woman, and Eve, and how they overlapped. So I'm not trying to be feminist or anything, but I mean, if you've read some of my things there, you'll probably, it comes across a little bit feminist, despite myself.
I didn't manage to get a copy of that piece. I only have a few pages of it. So I don't know what.
I'll publish it one day, but after I get everything out of the way.
So
I know some people have read it, but I'm not ready for the whole world to read it.
And are you still satisfied with the piece, or?
Oh no, I'm never satisfied with anything I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll go back and, I mean, if I did it again, I'd do it differently, but that's like everything. I mean, I don't think anyone ever makes something that they would consider perfect.
Right. So you examined the creation mythos from different cultures. Can we say like this?
Yes, I looked at the Greco-Roman origins of the Pandora legend, how that actually overlapped with the Middle Eastern Judeo-Christian Eve legend, and also went into some of the origins in more of the Parthianic, and what is now Iranian type origins.
And what do they have in common? Like, is there a thing you would say they all share in the creation mythos?
Oh, they're all very similar. They're all the same. They all blame the woman for everything. But equally, they've all got an alternative way of looking at it. For instance, when you look at Hesiod's version of the Pandora legend, it's talking about Pandora being gifted with a box that she opens, letting out evils into the world. An alternative story that was actually out there before Hesiod was that she was gifted with all of the benefits of mankind, and that was opened and basically allowed everything to escape into the world but hope. So we still had hope as part of us, but the other things we had to strive for. And there's a whole lot of sort of background into why that was caused. And it actually links into the whole Prometheus story. Unfortunately, Asclepius, his writings, we don't have a complete copy. So it's a lot of supposition, because nobody has the full story of the Pandora versus like Asclepius's whole Titan story. So we don't really know the Greco-Roman story because it's been lost in history. It's remarkable, but we've probably got 50% of it. We don't know how it ended, but there are a lot of similarities as well with Job. So looking at how Job reacted and how Pandora did, and how also Prometheus did, and how all these different characters in these stories acted, it becomes a foundation of how religion and theology have changed over time. So looking at Prometheus, Prometheus rejected the absolute God. And it's really the first story of rejecting and saying no, not only to government, but even to God. Prometheus said no to Zeus and was willing to basically be tied down in Tartarus in hell to daily have his liver ripped out by an eagle and come back everything. Eventually Hercules frees him, but we don't have that part of the story. We know from other things that had happened, but equally we have then a later story of Job, and Job of course is tested and argues, but I'm righteous. Why are you doing this? And there are different versions of questioning God in theology. I'm a good person. Why is it that you're having bad things happen to me? And this is it's still something that is out there debated, but most people don't look into it or explore it. And it's not even, I mean, the people bring this up now in modern society as if it's a new thing that we haven't looked at before. But it is through human history for thousands of years. And in what I was doing, I was investigating some of the oral versus sort of written stories and how they change, and even the differences in meaning of words.
Yeah, that's the interesting point there. The oral tradition back then, in time when people had no scripture. What kind of time is that, or was that, when humanity didn't have scripture? But
that actually varies.
Tradition.
Yeah. That actually varies. Even today, there are groups that don't have written language. There are very few and far between now. But for instance, Homer is now believed to be multiple people, but the original poet was basically someone who formulated a story about this area in the Adriatic Sea, where during the sort of collapse of society, probably during the Sea People expansion, that all these different cultures came together and battled, and over time it survived. It's remarkable to think about the linguistic tricks people learnt to be able to have these magnificently long stories that would be told over and over without losing information, which is actually interesting because Plato or Aristophanes wrote down everything that Socrates supposedly said. Yet Socrates wouldn't write down anything because he believed that in writing we lose the ability to really understand at a deeper level.
Okay, that's interesting. Why?
So could you imagine having to think something through enough that you can memorize and say it again, even with verbal tricks? So Homeric scholars and Homeric sort of literary agents, poets, etc., would go there and say the same thing, but they have tricks. They learn this beat and this like a song, and that's why it's very lyric. It's amazingly and captivating because of that. And there are still societies, especially in the Middle East. I've been to Jordan in the past, and I've actually, in part of my travels, I've been to some of these areas where people still have, apart from killing the lamb and roasting it whole, have stories, and it's remarkable that just the technique, and it's hypnotizing in a way, but in that sort of hypnotism that is delivered, it's also people learn. So I'm trying to, I mean,
would you let me ask you this? Would you say humanity lost something when humanity transitioned from oral tradition to scripture? Did we lose something? What we gained? I mean, what we gained is quite obvious.
No. Humanity haven't lost anything. Individuals have, because few of us do this anymore. Now, I'm a little bit weird in that I'm studying both the arts and sciences, and a part of why I keep studying the arts is I think it's important to actually remember some of these different aspects, and it helps you in many ways. So let's see, poetry, even English or European poetry and stories, have a similar flow, if we can remember them. The Germanic ones, the German stories, were actually very much like that until they were written. So this was the whole purpose of going around Barbarian and other areas like the Grimm brothers, not the way that we see the story tales in Disney now, but the original fairy tales, the way that they were told by parents to children and over time.
So we had the oral tradition time, then we had scripture, and now when we look at the blockchain technology, we still have scripture, but now the scripture is like publicly available and set in stone as soon as you write onto it. So for the first time, we have scripture that is publicly available for everyone. Is that another transition?
Yes and no. I mean, it will keep information. I mentioned earlier Asclepius and like Greek playwright, and we don't have his writings. In the future, it will be a scenario where there'll be so much information that we'll have to have data archaeologists, which was Isaac Asimov really did that well. His worlds captured that in a way that we have so much information in the future that even with advanced computer systems, we can't find it. So,
okay, so yeah, in the time of oral tradition, we had like too little data stored, and now we are going into a time where we have too much data stored. Maybe that's not a transition, but maybe a problem or something.
I don't know if it's a problem, but it will be interesting. So, like what I mentioned, I had people start to think about what does the word modern mean, and although it's got roots in the now, modern is misconstrued by most people. A simple word like that has deeper meaning in art and architecture and what is being modern versus postmodern, and what are the differences. And most people don't really think deeply about the meaning of words, and they just accept this is what it must mean. Now, that in itself is problematic. So when we're talking about it's all going to be set in stone, well, only if you decide to learn.
Well, we have a part about education later on, and we could like talk about that then. Talking about the creation mythos you did examine in your dissertation or your doctorate. In the Christian Judaic tradition, the Bible starts with chaos. And basically, if you want to see it like this, you could say that God is bringing order to chaos in a way. And I would like to read out the first sentences of the Bible, actually. And I will screen share this part. Because I think we find some very interesting things there. The Bible starts, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void. And darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, let there be light. And there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. So that's how the Bible starts. It starts with a scenario where we have tohu wabohu. This is like the Hebrew word, which means chaos. And we see it without form and void. Now, something happens here. We see in the beginning, and then and. I think these are timestamps right in the first sentences of the Bible. Because if you look at and, it is either happening at the same time or right after, but not before. So it's a kind of a timestamp there. And
it allows ordering, yes.
Yeah.
And it's. I mean, this is where it's also interesting in that the Hebrew people spent time in Babylon, learnt about the stories of Enki and Tiamat, and Tiamat would be chaos. So you have the story again of chaos and order, which was actually common right across that section of the world. And ironically, it wasn't even that section of the world. There's a flood myth in Chinese mythology as well. So all of which I think comes from sort of proto-human cultures, if I can call them that way, that experienced the drastic climate change that happened 10 to 11,000 years ago.
Wait. There was a climate change back then?
Oh, there's always climate change. Climate changes all the time. The climate's been 2 degrees warmer than it is now, 3 degrees colder than it is now. I mean, it's fluctuated massively. In the Roman warm period was the sort of the rise of the Roman Empire. At the fall of the Roman Empire was actually one of the colder periods, which led to crop failures in places like Germany. You'll probably know how cold it can get in Germany, but if you decrease the temperature, it's not even across the Earth. So in the north, it gets colder than it does in sort of the equatorial regions. And one of the results was at about the 3rd to 4th centuries AD, then we had a change of temperature where it dropped, and sort of the end of the Roman Empire also coincides with change in climate and it getting colder. And then it got warmer again during the early medieval. Then it dropped again. Then it got colder. By about the 16th century, we had a period where the Thames here in England froze. It got so cold that you could actually skate, if anyone skated back then, they didn't, across the Thames. It was at least a foot thick of ice on the London River. So
quite okay. So
climate change is normal, but if you go back 11,000 years, we're actually talking about a time just at the end of the Ice Age, where the Earth's climate changed massively. And it has been for the last 3 million years, which is really the sort of final rise of the Himalayas. The Himalayan mountains that their rise has changed the global weather pattern and continues to. Most people don't realize, but these areas are continuously changing because they're moving. The whole world, the tectonic plates are moving, and if we wait another 1,000 years, we'll find that the tallest mountain on Earth is taller than it was before. So if you've climbed it now, you haven't climbed it in the future.
If we go back to the Bible verses here for a second, it starts off with chaos, and then time is introduced, and light. And I find that funny because I think time chain is like, did you use that for Bitcoin or blockchain as a synonym, or where did the word time chain was used by Satoshi Nakamoto?
That actually goes back to one of the papers I referenced. It's 1997, I think, was the release date. It's in my references. But what you'll find is that the concept of what is blockchain was actually already in existence. It just wasn't spread between multiple machines economically. So the newspaper reference actually goes to that paper as well. So I can't actually take the credit for inventing that. It was already out there. Just the authors believed that there was no way to have a distributed system that would run across multiple nodes.
And what is it about time that actually brings order to chaos?
You don't get causality without time. I mean, think of the difference between time heals all wounds and time wounds all healed. Order actually is important. And
the light in the Bible, how do you read that? What is the light?
I'm part physicist, so I will also look at the growth of the universe from a small center that, apart from these people trying to do the whole multiverse theory, and which has no real foundation, people will sit there telling you how multiverse theory is based on quantum. No, it's not. It's based on metaphysics. It has less relevance than someone taking an ancient text from 3,000 years ago. It is an untestable whatever type. It's just complete BS. It's just, we don't want religion, so we'll make up BS. Now, but getting out of that, and I mean, it's also based on infinities, and infinities don't really exist. They're just a nice little human subscript that mathematically I won't get into here because I'll lose everyone and they'll just say technobabble. But
thank you.
But if you imagine everything in the universe compacted, it would have been nothing but light originally. No matter, just energy at immense, super compacted levels that are just unimaginable in human sort of conception. I mean, we can look at the numbers and we can write them down, and even in some of my engineering or physics studies, I can do the numbers, but there's no way I could actually imagine them.
I don't know if people really pay attention to the fact that Genesis block, I mean, the word Genesis is, you didn't make that up. It has to play a role somehow. So I think I know what you did there. And I think people underestimated that until now. Would you say Bitcoin is a tool to bring order into chaos in this world, and maybe that's the reason why it is being fought off by certain groups?
It is definitely a tool. So just to interrupt you, it's definitely a tool. How successful it will be, we'll only tell after time. I hope that it will do massive changes. And I'm not the most humble person on earth, as much as I'd like to be. I've done the whole Benjamin Franklin's 13 virtues bit, and I go through that every now and again, and I always fail in humility. But and any week I do that one, I fail on. But what I will say is I'm humbled enough to realize that it may not work. I hope it will, and I hope that I'm right. I hope, and I hope that other people will grab that. I mean, at the end of the day, I would love a system that delivers privacy while also allowing some of the worst parts of society to be tracked. And it's a balance. And this is what people don't seem to understand. You don't want to go completely to the sort of chaos. You don't want to go completely to order. You need to have both, and they need to match in the middle somehow. And to actually break the rules, you should really understand the rules. But that means understanding order. So unfortunately, too many people don't worry about learning what this means or what the difference is, and they sit there talking as if they have knowledge when they don't. And the heart of all of this is trying to create a system that enables people to decide what is right and wrong and agree as a society.
And if Bitcoin fails in the sense that it won't be adopted in the way we want it to be adopted, why would it fail? Is it because of technicalities, or is it because like we have powerful groups preventing it?
I think the technology will eventually get out there. It depends on what you consider success. If you're sitting there going, Bitcoin's at $1 million, then I don't see that as success. I see utilization as success, and
but you said you're not sure if we succeed. Why wouldn't we? What's the reason that it wouldn't be adopted in like 20 years, maybe?
Maybe I'm wrong. I mean, it's an experiment, it's a tool. I don't know if it will actually help. I don't know if it will be as successful as I hope. I'm more confident than I was, a lot more confident than I was 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I saw everyone trying to manipulate it, and I thought they'll find a backdoor, and I spent a lot of time and effort trying to make sure I hadn't screwed up totally. And I can't find any flaws, but that doesn't mean they're not there. It just means I can't find them. I might be blinded by my own invention. My own hubris might be stopping me from looking at things I should see.
Okay. Should we take a 5 minute here?
Not yet. We've still got a bit of time here. I'm going to throw in a bit of from the Genesis question, just to throw in from a bit of an outside perspective. One might say from the start of Bitcoin, there was Genesis, the start, which there was nothing before. There was void. So Bitcoin was born from Genesis into the void. And there were probable paths where it could have gone to darkness or go to light, where darkness would be use of the technology being used for criminal means, for bad things, for all the stuff that you actually hear about on BTC.
Well, I mean, although that happens, I don't believe that's sustainable. I still don't. I didn't believe back then. Just no one would listen to me, and they still don't.
So, and in contrast, we have the path of light, which is a less corrupt system, which will bring about a less corrupt society with people operating with honest money. From this outside perspective, some might see that the light has always been there and has traveled through the darkness, through troubled times in the past, and is now shining through the darkness through the other side. But there are many people who cannot see the light just yet. But well, you
light
kind
and
of
darkness are not separate. I mean, there's no
What was
such
that?
thing as all light, and all light would basically destroy us, and all darkness will freeze to death. So it's always a blend.
Craig, you're probably familiar with the term false light from the Bible,
Mm-hmm.
the false light. Because Joel, you just said there is like two paths to choose now: darkness with Bitcoin or light with Bitcoin. And I would add there is also a path that's to be called false light with Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that, Craig?
Wait, can you explain for the audience a bit more what that means, Michael?
Well, the false light is the way Satan appears to the world. Satan doesn't appear as the bad guy. He appears as the good guy, the false light. And that's a concept in the Bible. And I'm always like, it catches my attention when people say the light, because I'm never sure what light is meant as a Christian.
Yes, it's always difficult. Temptation, etc., but and what is right or wrong, and then of course you have Augustine with his comment, "Let me be good, my Lord, but not now." I mean, it's a difficult thing. I mean.
Or let me phrase this like this, Craig. Maybe this is easier to answer. How would Satan use Bitcoin?
Money's money. So how would someone use money? I mean, money can be used in many ways, good or bad. It's a tool. How would you use a hammer? You can use a hammer to build a house and shelter people, or you can use a hammer to beat someone's skull in. So
it's up to us.
It's up to us. Ideally, we don't want to do the bad, but someone always will.
On this topic, I've often seen people over the years, they refer to the Satoshi figure, yourself, and Bitcoin as, wow, he made Bitcoin, that's it. We don't need to actually do anything. And they sit back and just think they only need to hodl because, that's it. Bitcoin will solve every problem under the sun without them needing to do anything. Have you got a word on that one?
Yes, the only way that we solve political problems is through politics. And if we want a working democratic society, then we need an educated, engaged population. So I'm just completing my master's degree in political science at the moment. Because I believe that if I'm going to be part of a democratic society, I need to understand what I'm part of. So I finished that in July. But most people don't even bother with understanding the different issues that might be out there. They don't understand why it's good or bad to leave Iraq or Afghanistan. So people will sit there and go debating on it's bad, but everything is not black or white. There are multiple competing options. So, as an example, in the Biden decision to leave Afghanistan, you can say that's great, we're getting our soldiers out. But equally, what about the fact that we've spent 20 years changing the nation, and now we have a country with somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 female teachers that over the next 20 years will be able to change the nature of how boys are brought up in schools and to re-educate them not in a fundamentalist way, but a more cosmopolitan, integrated way in the world. And the first thing that's going to happen when the Taliban take control again is those female teachers will be probably stoned. And people will look at me and go, no, that would never happen. Why not? They did it last time. When they were in control, they stoned women. When they were in control, they destroyed 3,000-year-old artwork. They destroyed 1,500-year-old Buddhist statues. Why? Because they have a version of Islam that it doesn't fit. And I read a lot of, especially medieval Islamic scholars, some of the people like Azim Siena and others. And there are some remarkable sort of philosophical insights from all different groups, and we should embrace that. But to sit there and go, I can't learn from you, I have to destroy what you did, or to go backwards and say this person needs to be stoned because I have a sort of Shia interpretation of what the Quran said, ignoring the fact that the businesswoman that ran Muhammad's life was his first wife, a woman, or that his daughter took after him and ran everything after him, both women. So, I mean, there are contradictions here. So people need to start thinking this through. And it should be debatable. It should be openly discussable without someone throwing a rock at you. And if we're going to pull out of that country, that's what's going to happen. So we have to debate these things properly. We can't just go, it's bad. I mean, there are pluses and minuses. There are people and costs. And it costs a huge amount to the American population. It costs a huge amount to the British population. But what are the long-term gains? And no one's talking about this. And if we want a real democracy, we have to actually communicate.